Watching this horse in trot from behind, we can see the right side bending of his body and the exaggerated movement of the pelvis, the swinging to the right, because normally at the trot the pelvis should be more stable. And we've seen from the analysis of the walk that this horse can't bend his right hock properly, so he has to find a way to protract the right hind limb without bending the joints. At the walk, which is a much slower pace, he would extend his lumbar spine and then swing it to the right to protract the right hind limb. But on the trot, this is impossible. So what we see here is that he pushes harder with the left hind, almost makes a little jump to have the time to bring the right hind forward. And we can see clearly the smaller size of the muscles on the right side due to the atrophy of the gluteals. And also we notice that the right side of the pelvis is dropped at all times. So just before the right hind hits the ground, the pelvis rotates to the left and the tail is also kept on the left side due to the stronger muscles on the left side. Looking at the hips, we can see that that both are externally rotated, but the left one is more than the right. And the hocks are turned in at the beginning of the swing phase, and when they land, they straighten up, and that's why he has this accessory movement of the hocks, which is worse on the left side, and it's almost a jarring movement. On the left side, this accessory movement creates a valgus strain, whereas on the right side, we don't see the hock strain towards the medial side, and that's probably related to the big scar that he has on the medial side of the right hock, and that we've already seen in the observation. And this rocking movement of the pelvis creates this paddling movement of the distal limbs backwards. Now the left hind limb lands towards the midline to take most of the weight of the horse, while the right one lands outside the center of gravity of the horse, so completely outside of his the borders of his body. In addition, on the right side, because it lands to the right of the horse, when it strikes the ground, there's an accessory movement at the level of the fetlock, and this happens in varus, so the fetlock strains the lateral part. And they both land on the lateral side of the hoof. Watching the trot from the left, we see that he's weight bearing on the forelimbs, and we also see that there is almost no shock absorption through the scapula, and all the concussion from the forelimbs goes straight to the cervical spine, and we can see the caudal part of the cervical spine go into extension in the rhythm of the trot, and we can see the ventral part protrude forward in the rhythm of the trot, like now, 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 now. We can also see that the thoracic spine is in extension and stiff, and because of the lack of shock absorption, the thoracic cage just sinks between the two forelimbs. And with each step, the thoracic spine goes into even more extension. Also, we can see that the spine's processes, like in the withers and more caudally, with every step, they rotate towards the left side. So the vertebrae are rotating towards the right side, and this is probably happening to support and lift the right side of the body. The lumbar spine is also in extension and also making side bending and rotational movements to accommodate the transmission of force from the hind limbs. And the lumbar vertebrae, as well as the pelvis, are also rotating to the right side to support and lift. Now, the forelimb on this side is the side that on the walk we saw that doesn't have much movement in the scapula, and we still see that on the trot, and there is no movement in the glenohumeral joint as well, the shoulder joint. So the horse can't extend the shoulder joint, therefore it cannot protract effectively, and this is compensated by larger movements of the carpus and the distal forelimbs. However, these cannot cover the lack of movement in the shoulder. Now, looking at the left hind limb, this has to push back, to paddle back, to propel the horse forward and to lift the croup higher so that the right hind limb can move without bending the joints. And the external rotation that we've seen before at the hip, the left hip, makes the stifle, the patella, appear pointy towards the outside, and this limb is not engaging and propelling the horse forward, but it's just paddling behind and only pushing. Now we're going to look to the movement of the horse from the front. We can see the same thing, head and neck held high and stiff and bent to the right, absorbing every single concussion from the forelimbs. And we also see that the right forelimb is stepping towards the midline, and during protraction we can see the hoof on the inside of the forelimb trying to take most of the weight and offload the right hind, while the left forelimb is turning the hoof out during protraction. Because of the right side bending of the body, we can see the left hind limb between the forelimbs, and the right is again outside, completely out of the center of gravity. The hind limbs, because they've taken the role of pushing instead of the role of carrying, can be seen from the front as well, just paddling behind. And last but not least, we'll see the movement from the right side, which is the most problematic. So on this side, we can see that the caudal cervical spine is bent to the right, like we've seen on the other sides, and that he can't really bend to the left, and he tilts his head towards the handler. We see again the stiffness and the lack of movement in the thoracic spine and the right rotation of the vertebrae of the thoracic and lumbar spine. We see the right side bending of the lumbar spine and the pelvis to protract the right hind limb, and then we can see the right hind limb pushing back and not engaging properly. But we can see that now that he's probably warmed up and he has a better rhythm at the trot, he can actually flex both the stifle and the hock. And so on this side, he doesn't appear to weight bear so heavily on the forelimbs. And we can see that the shoulder movement has improved and the overall outline of the horse has improved, and the croup is not lifted up that much, and he gives a better impression. He has lifted his back a little bit more, and the thoracic spine is not in so much extension. And now we can see that he is able to absorb a little bit more of the shock. And we can see better movement of the shoulder, resulting in better movement of the forelimbs, and the hind limbs are not paddling so much anymore.